Picture, for a moment, a wide expanse of rice paddies stretching across the countryside of Japan in the early 17th century. The air is still. The surface of the water reflects the pale sky, and the faintest movement of wind brushes against the stalks. The Tokugawa Shogunate had just established itself after years of war and unrest. The country longed for stability, and so the shogunate built its foundation not upon gold nor upon silver, but upon rice. Rice was food, but it was also power. The measure of a lord's strength was not the number of soldiers he commanded, but the number of koku his land could produce. A koku, about 180 liters, was said to feed one person for a year, and so, in the eyes of the shogunate, every stalk of rice growing in the field was also a number in a ledger. Every harvest was an entry in a record. The bureaucracy that managed this simple grain would come to shape the entire Edo period. A soft question arises here, almost unnoticed. How could something so ordinary, so humble, become the backbone of a vast government? The system began with measurement. Officials known as surveyors traveled through the countryside, carrying wooden rods, ink brushes and scrolls. They knelt in the fields, counting furrows, measuring plots, and noting soil quality. These surveys were called kenshi. Imagine a village headman standing beside them, bowing respectfully, while farmers look on quietly from a distance. The surveyor marks a line upon a map, recording which portion belongs to which family, and how much can be expected in tax. The rhythm was steady. The surveyor's brush dipped in ink, lifted, and moved across the page. The paper absorbed the strokes in silence. For the farmers, this process determined much of their lives. They knew that at harvest, nearly half would be taken as tax. The remainder would feed their families. But there was also a kind of predictability. Year after year the system repeated itself. The bureaucracy of rice was strict, but it was also steady. And so one may wonder, did this predictability, even in hardship, bring a quiet kind of peace? Once collected, rice was not simply left in the fields. It was gathered, bound into straw bales, and stored in great wooden granaries. Picture these structures, tall, latticed buildings, with thick beams and wide eaves. Inside, the air was dry, the floor lined with planks. The smell was of straw and earth. Rows upon rows of rice bales filled the space, stacked carefully to the beams above. Guards watched the entrances. Clerks moved inside, counting the bales, making notes upon scrolls. Each stack was a record of wealth. Each tally represented obligations fulfilled. From the storehouses, rice began to flow. Down rivers on barges, along roads on the backs of porters and horses, toward the castle towns, and beyond them, toward Edo, the shogun's capital. It was a quiet flow, but a constant one. Like the turning of seasons, it moved without pause. Perhaps here one might ask, how did such silent movements sustain an entire government? And so we have begun to glimpse the system, the fields, the surveys, the granaries. In the chapters to come, we will drift more deeply into the lives of clerks and samurai, of farmers and merchants, of barges and roads, and of the invisible hands that kept the rice tax flowing. Inside the walls of castle towns, the bureaucracy of rice took on its quiet daily rhythm. Imagine a wooden administrative hall, tatami mats neatly spread, sliding doors open to the sound of cicadas in the summer air. Officials sit at low desks, their posture straight, their brushes steady. Each clerk has a ledger before him, rows of characters, tallies of rice owed, rice received, rice in transit. The silence is broken only by the faint scratch of brush on paper. On shelves nearby, scrolls are stored in wooden boxes carefully labeled. An official walks along the row, sliding one out to check a past record. In the corner, a senior scribe murmurs to a younger apprentice, guiding his hand in the art of brushstrokes. This was the heart of the bureaucracy, the slow, repetitive recording of every movement of rice. It may seem monotonous, but it was this monotony that held together the shogunate's order. One might wonder quietly, did the clerks themselves feel the weight of their role, or were they simply part of a vast, unseen machinery? For the farmers, rice was both life and obligation. Their days followed the cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting. When the harvest came, they measured out the portion that would go to their lord. Picture a farmer's home at dusk. A small wooden house, its walls of plaster and bamboo. A hearth burns in the center, a pot of rice steaming gently. The family sits close, speaking little, their thoughts perhaps on the coming delivery. When tax time arrived, families carried bales of rice from their paddies to the village granary. There, officials measured and recorded, noting carefully how much each household had contributed. There was hardship, yes. The farmers gave up nearly half their harvest. Yet the rules were steady, rarely shifting. Year after year, the same obligations, the same rhythms. In this predictability, even hardship could seem familiar. Perhaps we might pause here and reflect, is predictability itself a form of peace, even when the burden is heavy? From the countryside, rice moved steadily toward the centers of power. Along rivers, barges glided quietly, their sails furled when the wind was still, their long poles pushing against the current. Porters, bent beneath heavy loads, trudged along narrow roads. Horses carried bales over mountain passes, their bells tinkling faintly in the thin air. The rice was wrapped in straw, bound into cylindrical bales called komedawara. Each was tied securely with rope, making them easier to stack and transport. Imagine the slow rocking of a barge as rows of these bales fill its deck. The water laps gently at the hull. The flow of rice was like a river itself, always moving, always directed, but never hurried. Do you notice how this quiet movement, repeated season after season, begins to resemble the steady pulse of a heartbeat? Although rice was the basis of wealth, Samurai rarely consumed their stipends directly as rice. Instead, they brought their allotments to rice markets. Merchants bought and sold rice, converting it into coin. Picture an Edo market square. Low wooden stalls line the street. Merchants squat behind them, weighing rice with wooden balances. Samurai step forward, placing vouchers for their stipends, exchanging them for money. The atmosphere is calm, yet beneath the surface, a quiet current of commerce hums. Through this system, merchants grew wealthy, even as the samurai remained bound to stipends. A curious inversion of power unfolded quietly. The warriors held status, but the merchants held liquidity. It is worth wondering softly, did the shogunate sense how the flow of rice was slowly reshaping the flow of power? The rice tax was tied to another system, the sankin kotai, or alternate attendance. Daimyo were required to spend part of the year in Edo, leaving their families there as hostages, while maintaining their own domains. This system was expensive. Lords needed rice to fund their journeys, their retinues, and their Edo residences. Thus, rice became not only a measure of wealth, but the fuel for political control. Imagine a daimyo's procession leaving a castle town, samurai in neat rows, banners fluttering softly, porters carrying supplies. Along the road, villagers bow quietly as the procession passes. Through rice and travel, the shogunate kept the lords both powerful and dependent. Might we say then, that rice itself was the invisible thread tying daimyo to Edo? Within Edo Castle, rice arrived as tribute and stipend. Officials counted, recorded, and redistributed. The great halls of the castle echoed with the footsteps of messengers, the rustle of paper, the faint crackle of straw. Imagine the castle storehouses, vast and dim, their air cool even in summer. The walls rise high, and within them, neat stacks of rice bales line the space like silent sentinels. Officials walk slowly through, lanterns in hand, making notations as they pass. This was the hidden foundation of the shogunate. Not only swords and authority, but the quiet, persistent flow of rice into its vaults. Perhaps one might ask, was power, in truth, nothing more than the patient storage of grain? Yet, the system was not unshakable. In years of poor harvest, famine strained both farmer and lord. The records continued, but the numbers grew smaller. Picture a village in a time of lean harvest. The paddies are thin, the stalks short, the granaries less full. Farmers bring smaller bales, their faces weary. Officials still record with steady hands, but behind the neat brushstrokes lies quiet concern. Merchants too sometimes speculated on rice prices, creating instability in markets. The bureaucracy remained steady, but beneath it, currents of change stirred. One might wonder softly, can any system, no matter how orderly, withstand the unpredictability of nature? Despite challenges, the rice tax system endured for over 2 centuries. Its strength lay not in brilliance, but in routine. The same measurements, the same records, the same movements repeated across generations. Imagine again the cycle. The planting of seedlings in spring, the surveys in summer, the harvest in autumn, the counting in winter. Year after year, the same quiet rhythm. This constancy was the true secret of the shogunate's longevity. Perhaps here we may ask, is it in repetition, rather than innovation, that peace finds its longest rest? And so we return to the river where we began. The rice paddies stretch beneath a setting sun, their surface glowing with soft light. The water is still, the fields silent. The bureaucracy of the Tokugawa Shogunate's rice tax system was not dramatic. It was careful, it was steady. It was the quiet hum of administration, the soft turn of seasons, the patient hand of record-keeping. Farmers planted, clerks recorded, lords received, the shogunate endured. Across centuries, this system carried Japan through peace and order. In the end, it was not the clash of swords that defined this era, but the slow and steady flow of rice. From field to granary, from granary to record, from record to history.